Turntable collectors and restorers. On the bench today is a dual 1214, and it's one of many duals that I've restored and repaired over like 40 years. It's just amazing how they keep coming out of the woodwork, and it's almost the same story with every one. It'll have the original Shure cartridge on it. This is an M75, the early version. It's turntables from 72, 74 in that range. Most of them come from a very clean home. It was bought years ago, maybe part of a console. This one is in some kind of a tray. Underneath there were screw holes and the feet were taken off, so it was on some kind of a tray that maybe slid in and out. Something like that. It's a Noresco base. So this one was distributed by Electro-Home Kitchener. But actually what I want to talk about today are cartridges and needles for these turntables. So I'm talking about the original dual idler drive series, either the 10 series or the 12 series. This is a mechanical, well-built turntable, and it is a light and advanced arm for its day. But there are lighter weight ones, and even the ultra low mass series from that dual brought out late 70s, early 80s, it's still a pretty heavy tone arm. I've cleaned this one, took all the linkage apart, cleaned it up with lighter fluid, re-greased it, and re-oiled it with Phono-Lube, so all the automatic manual functions work. It still had, the person bought from said, well, I put a new needle a few years ago on the old Shure cartridge. Bought it from Radio Shack. So this is actually a generic needle. And when I look at it using my little needle scope, I've got one of these. There's actually very little wear on it. It's in really good shape. So you might say, well, Shure's are great sounding cartridges, especially the vintage ones. Why wouldn't I keep going with it? Well, I'll tell you why. I ran it, listened to a couple records, and here's what happens with these. Inside there's a couple rubber dampers that basically they're the suspension for the needle. The rubber becomes weak, so when you put this one on, this one tracks at 2 grams, the body of the needle is almost touching the record because the suspension in there is done. The rubber's gone soft, it's separated. Hard to say, I'm not going to break it apart. And that's actually part of the cartridge, not part of the needle. So you can put a new needle on it, it's not going to change anything. These were great in their day. It is time for a new cartridge and a new needle. And I rarely endorse a certain brand, but I've got to say this series, the latest series from Technica, the VM95 series, they're perfect for these. It's like somebody designed one for a vintage dual turntable or vintage techniques. Some really good points. This is the conical version. So this is the entry level dual magnet version. And it has built-in nuts, like little nuts built on the body, rather than having to hold it and hold a nut on this side and put the screw in. It's built in the cartridge body. Very easy to install, lines up very easily, has a very solid build. So I've got several of these around. It's almost like it's what I put on these when I restore them. This one, the earlier versions just work better with a conical stylus of these duals. That's my experience. I don't have anything scientific to back that up with. This 1214 does not have an anti-skating dial. It has a 3-position spring underneath, so it's in the 1 to 2 gram slot. And it works well, it sounds well. If you get a warped record, the suspension inside the cartridge, the little rubber bumper, and on these, it's hard to see in the camera, you can actually see it if it's in good shape. You can actually see the rubber bumper there. With these, you get a warped record or something, it follows the undulations of the record. So what you basically have is a tone arm and cartridge that are a good match for each other, good compliance. I'm not big into getting down to the engineering numbers on these. I just know what works. 10-15 years ago, when Shure was still making cartridges, I used to put an M44 on these. They reissued the M44, fit the head shell really well, easy to get new stylus for it. Well, Shure is not making cartridges anymore, and what you're ending up with is old stock. These are new stock. This is a new series. This one has a manufacture date of 22-12. So I don't see any reason. And in Canada, these are like $44.99. Buying them online. I actually bought these from a stereo store in Toronto online, and so it was, I think they were $47.99 when it was free shipping. And you might say, well, that's an awfully cheap cartridge. It sounds great for my almost 60-year-old ears. It sounds great. Nice bass, nice clean highs. Tracks all the records I have. Doesn't skip. That's all I can say. I rarely endorse a product. In my opinion, as a dual turntable restorer, the VM95C is the one to go with. Thank you very much.